My dad didn't cry, not when the doctor said she might not survive, not when the machine started screaming. He only asked one thing: how much will this cost? The room went silent, and then he signed the paper. A Do Not Resuscitate order. 72 hours later, he lost everything. My name is Ethan Miller. I'm 29 years old. Clean-shaven. Quiet. I don't react fast. I observe. I remember. My father, Richard Miller, built his empire from nothing. Real estate, private investments, medical supply contracts. He believes money is oxygen. Without it, you suffocate. Compassion, to him, is bad math. That Tuesday night, my grandmother collapsed at dinner. She was 82. Sharp, strong, the only person in the house who ever told me I didn't need to compete to matter. We rushed her to Street Vincent Medical Center, one of the hospitals partially owned by my father's company. Doctors moved fast. Machines beeped in sharp rhythm. Nurses spoke in low, urgent tones. The surgeon approached us. There's internal bleeding. We can operate. It's high risk, but it's her only chance. I stepped forward. Do it! But my father raised his hand. How much? He asked. The surgeon hesitated. With ICU and post-op care, around 400,000, possibly more. My father didn't blink. She's 82, he said calmly. What's the statistical survival rate? 35%. He nodded slowly, like he was reviewing a business proposal. Then he asked for the paper. I felt something cold move through my chest. Dad, what are you doing? He didn't look at me. Making a rational decision. He signed the Do Not Resuscitate order. Just like that. No vote. No discussion. No emotion. My grandmother lay unconscious in the hospital bed, while my father calculated her life like a failed investment. I stood there, frozen. For the first time in my life, I saw the truth clearly. Money wasn't just important to him. It was more important than blood. The next 72 hours were quiet. Too quiet. Nurses checked monitors. Doctors adjusted medication. No aggressive treatment, no emergency intervention. Just waiting. I sat beside her bed through the night. I remembered how she used to slip me small envelopes of cash when my father said I needed to learn struggle. How she told me, Ethan, never become so rich that you forget how to be human. Now she lay still, and my father slept peacefully at home. On the second day, I discovered something. The hospital board had emergency override authority in extreme circumstances, but that authority required majority approval from shareholders. My father wasn't just a visitor here. He was a major investor. His signature carried weight, and he had made sure no one would challenge it. That's when I understood. This wasn't only about money. It was about control. He wanted to prove that even life itself answered to him. On the third night, her condition worsened. The nurse looked at me carefully. If there was no DNR, she said quietly, we would intervene right now. I stared at the monitor. Steady. Slower. Fading. My father arrived an hour later. Calm. Composed. It's time to accept reality, he said. Reality. That word echoed in my head. He believed he had protected his assets, protected his bottom line, protected his legacy. He had no idea what was about to happen next. Because while he was calculating cost, I was calculating consequence. And 72 hours after he signed that paper, the most expensive loss of his life would begin. The third night felt longer than the first two combined. The air in the hospital room was cold, too clean, too quiet. My grandmother's breathing had slowed. Each inhale sounded borrowed. Each exhale felt like a countdown. My father stood near the window, hands behind his back, calm. Detached, like he was waiting for a quarterly report, not a heartbeat to stop. Ethan, he said quietly, you need to understand something. I didn't look at him. Medicine prolongs suffering. Sometimes restraint is mercy. Mercy. He used that word like it belonged to him, but this wasn't mercy. This was budgeting. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I stepped into the hallway to answer. This is Daniel Brooks from the hospital board, the voice said. My attention sharpened instantly. Yes? There's internal discussion happening. Some members are uncomfortable with the DNR decision. I stayed silent. He continued, your father's influence is strong. but not absolute. That sentence mattered, not absolute. Why are you telling me this? I asked. A pause. Because your grandmother funded this hospital 20 years ago. My chest tightened. What? She donated the land for the West Wing. It's under a legacy trust. Most people don't know that. I leaned against the wall, the West Wing. The ICU floor she was currently lying in. Daniel's voice lowered. There's a clause. In extreme medical conflicts involving a founding donor, the board can override private directives if deemed ethically compromised. My mind moved fast. Override, ethically compromised. Why hasn't it been used? Because your father owns 30% of this hospital. There it was. Power. Always power. I returned to the room. My father didn't turn around. She won't last the night, he said calmly. You didn't tell me she funded this hospital, I replied. Now he turned. Slowly. That's irrelevant. No, I said. It's leverage. His eyes narrowed. Don't play games with me, Ethan. I held his stare. I'm not playing. For the first time, something shifted in his expression. Not fear, not yet, but awareness. He realized I knew something. By morning, the board meeting had been called. Emergency session. My father received the notification on his phone. His jaw tightened. They wouldn't dare, he muttered, but they did. At 9 a.m., 6 board members sat around a long glass table. I wasn't invited, but I was present, silently, because Daniel had sent me the documentation, proof of my grandmother's founding contribution, proof of the ethical override clause, proof that my father's rational decision could be challenged. The vote was close, too close. 3 in favor of respecting the DNR, 3 in favor of intervention. Deadlock. Then Daniel spoke. As fiduciaries, we must ask ourselves whether cost control justifies passive withdrawal in a donor case. The optics alone could destroy this institution. Optics. That word hit harder than ethics, because hospitals run on trust, and trust collapses faster than stock prices. One member changed his vote, 4-3. Override approved. When the surgeon entered the room with the update, my father stood up immediately. You can't do that, he said sharply. We can, the surgeon replied. Board directive. I watched it happen. The machines were adjusted. Orders were given. Teams moved fast. Life-saving protocol initiated. My father turned to me. You did this. I didn't deny it. You signed her death to save money, I said quietly. I signed her life to protect legacy. His voice dropped. You think this is about compassion? No, I replied. It's about consequence. The surgery began. 4 hours. 5. Cease. Every minute stretched thin. My father paced the hallway now. Not calm anymore. Not composed. Because this was no longer a clean financial calculation. This was public. Board members whispering. Legal teams reviewing documents. Investors asking questions. If word leaked that a hospital investor signed a DNR to cut costs on a founding donor, the damage wouldn't be medical. It would be catastrophic. 72 hours after he signed that paper, the first domino fell. A journalist contacted the hospital PR department. Anonymous tip. Conflict of interest. Ethical concern. Major shareholder influence. My father's phone rang non-stop. Not from doctors. From partners. From investors. From legal counsel. He looked at me slowly. You're trying to destroy me. I met his eyes. No, I said calmly. You destroyed yourself the moment you signed that paper. Inside the operating room, they were still fighting to save her. Outside, my father's empire had begun bleeding. And unlike surgery, there would be no DNR to protect him from what was coming next. The surgery lasted 8 hours. When the surgeon finally stepped out, his face was unreadable. She's alive, he said. 2 simple words. Alive. Critical, but alive. I closed my eyes for a moment. My father didn't look relieved. He looked calculating, because survival meant something else now. It meant scrutiny. By afternoon, the story leaked. Not the full version, just enough. Major hospital shareholder accused of influencing end of life decision. The headline spread fast, too fast. Financial blogs picked it up first, then local news, then national outlets. The narrative wasn't kind. A wealthy investor, A cost-based DNR, a founding donor grandmother, a board override. It sounded cold. It sounded ruthless. It sounded exactly like my father. His phone didn't stop ringing. Legal. BR. Board members. Investors. One call lasted less than 30 seconds. He pulled the phone away slowly. They're reviewing my position, he said quietly. Reviewing. That's corporate language for distancing, for preparing to cut ties, for protecting the brand. Hospitals cannot survive public distrust, and right now, he was poisoned. By evening, Miller Holdings stock dipped 4%. Not dramatic, but noticeable. Analysts began speculating. Ethical instability, leadership concerns, reputational exposure, words that scare shareholders. My father locked himself inside his office at home. For years, that room was his throne. Now it felt smaller, less secure. He called me in around 9 p.m. Tell them to stop, he said. I leaned against the doorway. I don't control the media. You triggered this. No, I replied calmly. You did. His jaw tightened. You're my son. I was, I said quietly. That landed harder than I expected. He stared at me. You think this is justice? I think this is transparency. The next morning, a second article dropped. This one was worse. It detailed the board override vote. It mentioned conflict of interest. It questioned whether profit motives had influenced medical ethics. And buried in the article, a single, devastating line. Miller Holdings owns significant shares in multiple regional healthcare institutions. Plural. Not just one hospital, multiple. Now regulators were watching. The stock fell 9% by noon. Investors hate uncertainty, and ethics scandals create infinite uncertainty. One major partner pulled out of a pending acquisition deal. Another demanded internal investigation. Legal fees began stacking. Emergency PR consultants were hired. Damage control mode activated. But damage had already been done. That evening, I visited the hospital again. My grandmother was stable, still unconscious, but fighting. Machines beeped steadily now, not fading, holding. I sat beside her. I didn't do this for revenge, I whispered. I did it because someone had to draw a line. She didn't respond, but I hoped. Somewhere inside, she understood. When I returned home, my father was watching the financial news. They were discussing him by name now. Panel analysts, cold commentary. This could reshape his entire portfolio. Board pressure may force divestment. Reputational risk is compounding. Compounding, just like interest. Just like consequences. He muted the television slowly. For the first time in my life, he looked uncertain, not angry, not dominant. Uncertain. How far does this go? He asked quietly. I stepped closer. That depends, I said. On what? On whether you understand that life isn't a balance sheet. Silence filled the room. Heavy, uncomfortable, real. By the end of day 3, 72 hours after he signed that DNR, Miller Holdings had lost 18% of its market value. Board members were scheduling emergency restructuring talks. Regulatory audits were being discussed. His empire wasn't destroyed yet, but it was bleeding. And unlike my grandmother, there was no surgical team rushing in to save it. He finally asked the question he should have asked in the hospital. What do you want, Ethan? I looked at him calmly. I want you to understand what a human life costs. He swallowed hard, because for the first time, the price wasn't theoretical. It was visible, measured, falling. The morning started quietly, but quiet in the Miller world is never safe. Emails flooded my father's inbox, legal threats, shareholder complaints, media inquiries, regulatory audits. Each message a reminder. His decision had consequences. The board called an emergency session. He couldn't ignore it. Not anymore. I was invited. Not as a guest, as a witness, because I held proof of my grandmother's legacy, proof of the override clause, and proof that his rational decision had already failed. He entered the boardroom, face pale. Investors whispered. Lawyers shuffled papers. The chairwoman spoke first. Mr. Miller, your actions have triggered ethical and financial scrutiny. We must vote on interim control measures. He swallowed. I disagree, he said. But disagreement doesn't stop corporate procedure. Votes were cast. Fou en favor. 3 opposed. The decision was final. Temporary control of several hospital assets shifted. He turned to me, disbelief clear in his eyes. You orchestrated this. I shook my head. No, you did. I only revealed it. He realized that power isn't just money. It's knowledge. It's leverage. It's timing. By noon, the press had caught wind. Investor crisis. Miller Holdings faces ethical and financial review. Social media exploded. Journalists dug deeper. Did a shareholder try to withhold life-saving care to save costs? The words echoed in every boardroom, every partner meeting, every shareholder call. By evening, the first domino fell. A major hospital partner demanded immediate divestment. Share prices continued to tumble. Investors called for a full audit. Lawyers drafted contingency plans. And my father, he finally looked afraid. Not angry, not calculating, afraid. I approached him quietly. You wanted control over life and death, I said. He stared at me. Do you understand now? I do, he whispered. But understanding came too late. The damage was done. That night, he sat alone in his office. No assistant, no lawyers, no advisors, just the monitor. Watching numbers fall, watching reputation crumble. He had underestimated what happens when your decisions collide with legacy, law, and human consequence. And for the first time, he felt powerless. Meanwhile, I checked the hospital. Grandmother was recovering. Machines beeped steadily. Nurses moved efficiently. She would live. Because I acted with patience. Because I understood leverage. Because unlike my father, I calculated human and financial consequences equally. By the end of the week, the board finalized new restrictions. My father retained title, but influence? Severely limited. He was no longer untouchable. His empire had cracks now, and I controlled the key to those cracks. He looked at me quietly and said, "This wasn't supposed to happen. It was always going to happen," I replied. By the morning, the damage was irreversible. Miller Holdings had lost 23% of its market value. Partners demanded accountability. Investors questioned every previous deal. Lawyers drafted emergency compliance plans. The board had partial control of all hospital assets. My father, Richard Miller, sat at his desk, pale, no advisors, no assistant, no power. I walked in calmly. He looked up, voice trembling. "You orchestrated this?" "No," I said softly. "You did it yourself." He swallowed hard. "You've ruined everything." "Not ruined," I corrected. "Balanced." Corrected. He couldn't comprehend it yet. I had spent years preparing quietly, learning the documents, finding the clauses, not reacting emotionally. Every decision he had made for profit alone, every shortcut, every cold calculation had left him exposed. By afternoon, the press was relentless. Investor neglect leads to hospital ethics scandal. Major shareholder decisions questioned. Family empire cracks. Under ethical controversy. His name appeared in every headline, and there was nothing he could do. That evening, I finally spoke to him. "Do you understand why this happened?" I asked. He shook his head slowly. "I thought I controlled everything." "You controlled nothing that isn't earned," I said. The words landed like bricks. Rachel, my sister, finally arrived at the estate. She looked anxious, confused. "Ethan, is he okay?" she whispered. I shook my head. "He's learning something he never could in a classroom," I said. "Consequences." Her eyes widened. You've done all this quietly?" "Yes," I said calmly. "Quiet, precise, permanent." My father called me later that night. "Ethan, what now?" I stared at him for a moment. "Now," I said, "you understand that life, power, and legacy are not measured by money alone. They are measured by wisdom, patience, and action." He was silent. For the first time, I saw him humbled. Weeks passed. The board finalized restructuring. My father retained the title. But control? Limited. Rachel learned humility. Investors and partners now treated me as the key decision maker. Miller Holdings survived because I acted. I visited my grandmother after her recovery. She smiled weakly. "You did what was right," she whispered. I nodded. "No one saw it coming," she said. I didn't need to answer. By the end of the year, the family understood one simple truth. Money without judgment is dangerous. Power without patience is fragile. And underestimating Ethan Miller is fatal. Clean-shaven, calm, observant. I had not sought revenge. I had sought correction. And in doing so, I became the one my father, my sister, and everyone else had to rely on. Not by anger, not by shouting, not by spectacle, but by precision, patience, and permanence. He gave my sister $4 million. He called me a failure. And in the end, I became the only one capable of saving the family he almost destroyed. I am Ethan Miller, and he knows it.